Welcome to our deep dive into the world of hypnosis. You've brought us some fascinating material from a Russian expert, and I'm ready to uncover the surprising nuances behind this whole practice.
Yeah, this expert's work is it's really a rich blend of both time-tested and then some more unconventional approaches.
Perfect. We're not here for just the typical stage show stuff. Let's jump right into the nitty-gritty. What's this expert's take on inducing a hypnotic state?
Well, they place a significant emphasis on the hypnotist's voice. It's not just what they say, but the rhythm and tone they employ that plays a really crucial role in guiding the listener.
Interesting. So we're talking about that classic, soothing, almost melodic voice we often associate with hypnosis.
Well, while a soothing tone can be a factor, this expert highlights something that you might not expect: monotony.
The monotony. Now that's unexpected. Why would that be effective?
Well, think about those times when you felt yourself deeply relaxed while listening to rhythmic sounds like rain or ocean waves.
Ah, I see where you're going with this. There's something about that steady repetition that seems to quiet the mind.
Precisely. The experts suggest that monotony actually has a direct impact on brainwave patterns, and this makes the listener more receptive to suggestions. It gently nudges the brain into a different state of awareness.
That's fascinating. So, is this monotonous vocal approach the only way to induce hypnosis?
Not necessarily. This expert also discusses an alternative method known as provocation, highlighting the work of hypnotist Dave Ellman.
Provocation. Okay, now you got my curiosity. How does that differ from the more traditional induction methods?
Well, provocation focuses less on inducing a trance-like state through the voice, and it's more about strategically guiding the listener's thoughts through a series of mental exercises. Think of it as taking control of the direction of their thinking.
So it's almost like a mental workout that leads someone into hypnosis. That's pretty different from what I imagined.
Yeah, it is a distinct approach, and as the expert suggests, it can be just as effective as more traditional methods.
Wow, this is already giving me a new perspective on hypnosis. Now, I'm wondering about the role of imagery. Does this expert address that aspect of hypnotic techniques?
Absolutely. The expert is a strong advocate for the use of imagery, emphasizing its power not just visually, but also through auditory and other sensory experiences. And these vivid mental pictures help to deepen the hypnotic state.
So it's about crafting a richly detailed world within the listener's mind, almost like a waking dream they can step into.
That's a great way to put it. And what's even more intriguing is the expert's concept of emotional ramping up to further intensify the experience.
Emotional ramping up. I'm not sure I follow.
Well, think about it this way. Some of our most vivid and lasting memories are often tied to strong emotions, both positive and negative.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Emotions seem to etch those experiences right into our memory.
Exactly. The expert even provides an example of a hypnotist using the image of approaching wolves to evoke a fear response in the listener.
Wow, that's quite an intense image to conjure, but I can see the logic behind it. If emotions make memories more powerful, it makes sense that they could also intensify the hypnotic experience.
Precisely. By tapping into those raw emotions, the hypnotist aims to make the experience more real, more visceral for the listener, deepening their hypnotic state.
Okay, so we've talked about inducing hypnosis and deepening it with imagery and emotions. But what about the suggestions themselves? Is there a particular art to crafting suggestions that are truly effective?
There is. And this expert highlights the importance of motivated suggestions. It's not simply about suggesting any action. The suggestion needs a clear purpose or motivation for the listener.
So give me an example of what that might look like in practice.
Sure. The expert gives the example of suggesting to a male listener that he pick flowers. Now, this suggestion alone might not have a strong impact, but suggesting that he pick flowers for his mother's birthday, well, that adds a layer of emotional motivation and purpose.
Because now there's a meaningful reason behind the action.
Yeah.
I can see how that would make a big difference.
Exactly. Think about it. Even in our daily lives, we're far more likely to take action when we have a strong and personal why behind it. Motivated suggestions tap into that very human drive.
This is all making a lot of sense. Now, I'm curious about the different schools of thought within hypnosis. Are there any specific approaches or techniques that this expert favors?
There are, indeed. And one particularly noteworthy figure that the expert discusses is Milton Erickson.
Ah, Milton Erickson. He's considered a legend in the field of hypnotherapy, known for his really unconventional and innovative approaches. What insights does this expert offer about Erickson's work?
Well, they highlight Erickson's unique practice of combining hypnotherapy with the creation of a resourceful place in the listener's mind. Think of it as a mental sanctuary, a safe haven.
So he was essentially creating a positive mental space to prepare the listener for transformation.
Exactly. By establishing this inner sanctuary, Erickson could then guide the listener towards addressing their issues or goals from a place of strength and positivity.
What a brilliant concept. It seems like he understood that creating the right mental environment is crucial for successful therapy. Now, speaking of reaching deeper states of hypnosis, are there any other advanced techniques that this expert discusses?
The expert delves into a technique known as fractionation, which is aimed at increasing suggestibility in the listener.
Fractionation. Can you break down how that works?
Imagine a gentle rocking motion, repeatedly guiding the listener in and out of hypnosis. With each dip back into that state, their susceptibility to suggestions increases.
So it's like building up that hypnotic responsiveness through a carefully orchestrated pattern of repetition.
Yes, and within this approach, the expert describes a rather intriguing technique called the jerk technique, which is used to deepen the hypnotic trance.
The jerk technique. Okay, now you've really got my attention. What does that entail?
It involves a skilled practitioner creating a sudden jolt of energy, like a quick jerk of the hand, immediately followed by a state of deep relaxation.
That sounds pretty intense. Does it work for everyone? Is there any risk involved?
It's certainly not a technique for beginners, and it requires a high level of expertise and sensitivity on the part of the practitioner.
It sounds like a powerful tool that needs to be used responsibly and with a deep understanding of its potential impact.
Absolutely. And speaking of responsibility, the expert concludes his discussion with a poignant reminder about the ethical considerations that should guide all hypnotic practice. He emphasizes that choosing this path means you need to genuinely care for people, to carry a sense of goodwill and a desire to benefit those you work with. He even states that if you don't love people, you're in the wrong line of work.
That's a powerful statement
Mhm.
and a great reminder that even with these potentially powerful tools, it's ultimately about respecting and honoring the individuals we're working with. It seems like a good point to pause and reflect on what we've learned so far. We'll be back shortly to continue our exploration of the world of hypnosis. Welcome back. We've been exploring some really thought-provoking concepts about hypnosis. Now, I'm curious about how a hypnotist actually gauges the effectiveness of their techniques. Like, how do they know if someone is truly entering like a deeper state of hypnosis?
It's a great question, and it's not as simple as checking a gauge or reading a meter, right? This expert emphasizes the importance of keen observation, looking for subtle shifts in the listener's physical and behavioral cues.
Okay, so what are some of those like telltale signs? What should we be looking for?
Well, it can certainly vary from person to person, but some common indicators include changes in breathing patterns. You might notice the breath becoming deeper and more regular. Muscle relaxation is another key sign, as well as shifts in eye movements, and even pupil dilation.
It's almost like the body mirroring what's happening in the mind, reflecting that shift into a different state of consciousness.
Exactly. And as the hypnotic state deepens, you might also observe something called catalepsy.
Catalepsy. That sounds a bit like a medical term. What does that look like?
Catalepsy is a state where the limbs become rigid, almost frozen in place, unresponsive to external touch or movement. Imagine someone holding their arm outstretched and it remains completely still even if you try to move it.
Wow, that's incredible. I've never witnessed that before. So in the context of hypnosis, would you consider this a sign that the listener is deeply immersed in that altered state?
It certainly can be. Catalepsy is a fascinating physiological response that can often accompany a deep hypnotic trance.
So we've talked about observing physical cues, but what about the listener's responsiveness to suggestions? Is that an indicator of hypnotic depth as well?
Absolutely. As the listener enters deeper states of hypnosis, their suggestibility tends to increase. They become more open to accepting and responding to the hypnotist's suggestions.
So if a hypnotist were to suggest that the listener's arm is becoming lighter and starting to float upward, someone in a deeper state would be more likely to experience that sensation.
Precisely. They might even begin to physically lift their arm, fully believing that it's weightless. It's a powerful demonstration of the mind-body connection that's so central to the practice of hypnosis.
It's amazing how these techniques can tap into those deeper layers of our awareness and create such profound experiences.
It truly is. And it's important to remember that these techniques aren't just for entertainment or stage shows. They have valuable applications in various fields, particularly in the realm of therapy.
That's right. Hypnotherapy is becoming increasingly recognized as a powerful tool for helping people overcome fears and anxieties, manage pain, break unhealthy habits, and even improve their overall well-being.
Indeed. And the techniques we've been discussing, like inducing relaxation, deepening the hypnotic state, and using motivated suggestions, all play a key role in achieving those therapeutic goals.
This deep dive has already given me so much to think about. And it's clear that hypnosis is a far more nuanced and complex practice than I initially realized.
It certainly is. And while this expert doesn't shy away from exploring the more unconventional aspects of these techniques, he also emphasizes the importance of approaching them with responsibility and respect for the individual.
Speaking of responsibility, we touched on the ethical considerations earlier. Could you elaborate a bit more on what this expert has to say about ensuring that hypnosis is used for good?
He stresses that hypnotists have a tremendous responsibility to use their skills ethically and always with the best interests of their clients at heart.
That makes sense. After all, they're working with people's minds and emotions, which requires a great deal of sensitivity and care.
Precisely. And that means using hypnosis only for beneficial purposes and always obtaining informed consent from the client before proceeding.
Informed consent is crucial in any therapeutic setting, but it seems especially vital when dealing with something as potentially powerful as hypnosis. Now, I'm wondering, what about those situations where someone might be hesitant or resistant to hypnosis? Is it even possible to hypnotize someone against their will?
That's a common concern, and this expert addresses it directly. He states that true hypnosis requires cooperation and a willingness to engage in the process. You can't force someone into a hypnotic state if they're actively resisting.
That's reassuring to hear.
Yeah,
It reinforces the idea that hypnosis is ultimately about empowering the individual, not controlling them.
exactly. And it's also important to dispel the myth that hypnotists can make people act against their own moral code or values.
Right. It's not like in those old movies where someone snaps their fingers and suddenly you're under their control, doing things you'd never normally do.
Not at all. A skilled hypnotist can amplify or redirect existing desires and tendencies, but they can't implant entirely new ones or override someone's fundamental sense of right and wrong.
That's a helpful distinction to make. It helps to separate fact from fiction when it comes to understanding the true nature of hypnosis.
And it all circles back to the importance of ethical practice. Hypnosis, like any powerful tool, has the potential to be misused.
But when used responsibly and skillfully, it can be a transformative force for positive change.
Exactly. It offers a unique way to help people tap into their inner resources, overcome limitations, and create more fulfilling lives.
Now, this might be a bit outside the scope of this expert's work, but I'm curious. If there are ways to apply some of these hypnotic techniques in our everyday lives, even if we're not trained hypnotists, can we learn to harness the power of suggestion and imagery for personal growth?
That's an interesting question, and one that deserves further exploration.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of hypnosis. Before, we were wondering if it's possible to integrate some of these techniques into our daily lives for personal growth, even if we're not trained professionals. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really intriguing idea, and one that a lot of people have explored. While we certainly wouldn't recommend trying any advanced techniques without proper training, there are definitely elements of hypnosis that we can incorporate into our daily routines.
Okay, that's good to know. So how can we tap into that hypnotic power without the need for a swinging pocket watch? Where do we even begin?
Well, it starts with understanding the fundamental principles at play. One of the key elements, the power of suggestion. And this applies not only to how we communicate with others, but also, and perhaps more importantly, to how we talk to ourselves.
That makes sense. We're constantly feeding ourselves suggestions throughout the day,
Mhm.
whether we realize it or not. Those "I can't do this" or "I'm not good at that" thoughts, those are essentially negative suggestions that can limit our potential.
Precisely. And just as a skilled hypnotist uses carefully crafted suggestions to guide the listener's experience, we can consciously choose to use positive affirmations to reprogram our subconscious minds. By shifting our self-talk, we can influence our thoughts, feelings, and ultimately our behaviors.
So instead of dwelling on those "I'm terrible at public speaking" thoughts, we could try replacing them with something like "I am a confident and engaging speaker," even if we don't fully believe it at first.
Exactly. It might feel a bit strange at first, but by consistently repeating those positive affirmations, we can start to shift our beliefs and create new neural pathways that support the outcomes we desire.
It's like planting seeds of possibility in our minds and nurturing them with consistent positive reinforcement. Now, speaking of creating those powerful mental experiences, what about the role of imagery and visualization? Are those techniques we can utilize in our daily lives?
Absolutely. Visualization is an incredibly powerful tool used by athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, really high achievers in all walks of life to enhance their performance and achieve their goals.
Yeah, I've often heard about athletes mentally rehearsing their routines before competitions, visualizing themselves executing each move flawlessly. Is that what you're referring to?
That's a great example. By creating vivid mental images of ourselves successfully completing a task or achieving a desired outcome, we're essentially priming our minds and bodies for success. It's like providing ourselves with a mental blueprint to follow.
I can see how that would be beneficial, and I imagine incorporating strong emotions into those visualizations would make them even more effective.
Absolutely. The more senses we engage in our visualizations, the more real and impactful they become.
So if I'm visualizing myself giving a presentation, I shouldn't just see myself speaking confidently, but also feel the excitement of connecting with the audience, hear the murmurs of agreement, and perhaps even feel a sense of accomplishment at the end.
Exactly. By layering in all those sensory details and positive emotions, you create a powerful mental movie that can have a profound impact on your real-world performance.
This is incredible. It's like we all have these untapped wells of hypnotic potential within us, just waiting to be explored.
That's a great way to put it. And it's important to remember that this isn't about becoming a stage hypnotist or trying to control other people's minds. It's about learning to harness the power of our own minds, tapping into the incredible potential of our subconscious, and using these tools to create the lives we truly desire.
That's a beautiful and empowering message. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into this fascinating world, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners will carry with them?
I think the most important thing to remember is that while hypnosis might seem mysterious or even magical on the surface, at its core, it's really about understanding the incredible power of the human mind. By learning to tap into that power, whether through formal hypnotic techniques or simply by incorporating elements of suggestion and visualization into our daily lives, we unlock a world of possibilities for growth, healing, and transformation.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. I feel like I've gained a whole new understanding of not only the techniques of hypnosis, but also the power of the mind itself. We've explored so much, from the intricacies of induction and deepening techniques to the importance of ethical practice and the potential applications in therapy and personal development.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights.
And to our listeners, we encourage you to continue this exploration. Dive deeper into the works of Milton Erickson, explore the vast world of affirmations, experiment with visualization techniques. The possibilities are endless. And most importantly, never stop questioning, exploring, and marveling at the extraordinary capabilities of your own mind. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into the world of hypnosis. Until next time, keep those minds curious and stay open to the endless possibilities that lie within.